Good morning and welcome to Jenny Kendler. Welcome, Jenny, to our session. As you know, we're just involved into the Tino Festival. The Nature of Cities Festival, which is going to be happening at the end of March, from the 29th until the 31st of March. And we are having a very much number of interesting artists from throughout just expressing, conveying, sharing with us what they're doing through their art for the environment. Now, it's very interesting to learn more about Jenny and her way of just making art. First of all, we have to say that Jenny is not only an artist but also an environmental activist. She is based in Chicago, and she has really a very interesting record of activities all throughout. Your work on climate change about diversity loss has been shown at the Storm King Art Center, the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, the Pulitzer Arts Foundation. You have worked together with a number of environmental organizations like 350.org and much more. Now, I would be first of all showing some of your interesting artworks, and at the same time, I would just let me see. Here it is. Yes. So, and at the same time, I would just start with some questions. First of all, your background, quite interesting, in fact, that you combine together art and environment. Can you tell us more about it? Like, you are an artist and then you become an environmental activist through your art. How do you do it? How did it start? Can you just tell us more about it?
Sure. And firstly, I just want to say thank you for welcoming me to be part of this. I'm really excited to learn more about the work that you all are doing, and feel like we're really working on the same team to try to reconnect us back with the natural world. Yeah, I think that really my interest in the natural world is just something that has always been a part of me. My mother grew up in California, and she was very interested in nature. Even as a child, I actually grew up in a solar home, which would have been quite unusual for the time that I grew up in the 1980s in Virginia. But that all of the sort of environmental practices of composting, and we were showering in water that was heated by the sun, was just very normal for me. So really the process of melding art and the environment was not so much that I was adding that on, but rather that I was like always wanted to be an artist. And then I sort of came back to understanding that really what I wanted to make work about was not just making work about nature, but making work collaboratively with nature, and moreover, trying to use my work to help support and give voice to the natural world, which otherwise has like no voice in our political and economic systems. So it's been a very fulfilling process to figure out how to bring those two parts of my life together.
And no, thanks. And so do you think that whatever you have been done until now through your art, do you think that in a way it's like you do something and then it's like the butterfly effect, like you see the consequences, the impact of it on the other side of the world? Did you just experience some of this in your life through your activities?
Yeah, that's a great question. And people are oftentimes very curious. They want to understand, especially because I work in public art and I work in, work collaboratively with scientists, and I'm engaging with the public and even co-creating work with them. They want to understand, how does this actually affect people? And I guess I would have like two different ways of answering that question. One is I totally agree with what you're saying about the butterfly effect. I think that there are real tangible effects from the work. For example, one of the projects that I did at the Pulitzer Arts Foundation that you mentioned, in collaboration with the Natural Resources Defense Council, which is an international NGO that works on environmental issues, was a project to raise awareness about the plight of the monarch butterfly, which especially in the continental United States is highly endangered because of pesticide use, specifically Bayer chemicals, Roundup chemical that's being applied to commercial agriculture here. And so we created a whole project to raise awareness about that was giving people these biodegradable balloons filled with milkweed seed. Now we know that people felt more engaged and excited about that issue when they were involved in the project. But one of the really exciting things that we found out after the fact, the project was covered in a magazine. And we know that here in the state of Illinois, where I live, the mayor of Aurora, Illinois, read about the project in a magazine. And just based on being inspired by that, he actually decided to stop mowing the highways on like 300 miles of highway. So that would allow the milkweed plant, which is the monarch's food source, to grow there instead of it being, mowed and killed off by pesticides and herbicides. So that's an exciting example of how we can actually see a real tangible effect. But I would say that for me, I'm actually more interested in thinking of art as like unquantifiable in the way that it affects the world. I don't think that that looking at metrics in the same way that we would look at a science experiment is quite the right way to think about it, because what I'm really interested in is shifting culture. And so, it's harder to measure that, but I do think it's incredibly important because our culture is what determines our values. And our values are what underlie our entire system. So everything from, our extractive economic systems to our systems of governance are affected by the values that we hold dear. And when we think that human beings are the center of the world and that we exist to have dominion over nature, that creates a certain set of environmental policies, a certain set of economic and governmental policies. And I really think that that's what we need to revise and think through and have another more integrated way of living with the natural world where we're decentering the human and coming back into reciprocal relationship with nature. And so how do we shift those values, right? We have to change our culture, and artists can be a part of that. And not, we need all the tools in the toolbox. It's not just artists. It's going to be playwrights and dancers and poets and philosophers and musicians and people making big budget Hollywood movies. But we do have to change these things so that we can envision another way of living in reciprocity with the world.
So we know that and that takes me to the other question, because we know that the decision makers are politicians, right? Mm-hmm. So, and they just sit in this roundtable discussions and they talk, but we have been experiencing that no real results have been achieved until now. So would you have the opportunity to be sitting at one of those roundtable discussions as an artist? Would you just stay there as an observer, or you would rather, have something to say? And if you would like something to say, what would you say? Which questions would you address politicians?
Mm-hmm. I certainly wouldn't be sitting quietly on the sideline. That would be quite impossible. I think it would be really, it would be exciting to be in the room. And I think that honestly, so I've been artist in residence with the Natural Resources Defense Council since 2014. And that's an organization that's primarily formed of lawyers who are like suing on behalf of the earth. And it's exciting to be the artist in the room with a group of people who are highly skilled at their profession. And I do think that it brings a lot to the discussion. So I think it would be perhaps a somewhat similar experience. I think that, when you sort of imagine this phrase outside the box, people always say they want to think outside the box, but the problem when you're inside the box is that you don't know that you're inside the box. And so I think that may be what's going on with a lot of our politicians, is that they have this pretty limited cultural framework that they're sort of like don't know that they're essentially wearing blinders and not seeing a lot of the possibilities. And I think that artists, it could be really exciting to have artists in the room to kind of perturb and trouble some of those baseline assumptions and say that, like, really there may be other ways that we could conceive of doing things. I think that, artists can be a little bit like the, you know, a coyote in a sense, that they can be tricksters and they can be jokesters, and they can think about things in non-traditional, non-linear ways and kind of be, you know, outside of the traditional discussion. And that may bring like a lot of like progressive movement.
Jennifer, would you be able to be explaining this artwork for us?
Say that one more time.
Yes, like the specific, this is one of your artworks, right? Can you yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a project called the Underground Library. So it was on display at a few different museums, most recently at the ICLEI Wattis in San Francisco, and also at Storm King. And the way that the project works is there's 5 decades essentially of books that I've collected. So a whole library of books on climate change. So that'll be everything from technical manuals to the, you know, the bestsellers, Bill McKibben's books, and thinking through how, you know, great thinkers, theorists, scientists have for 5 decades tried to capture the public imagination, tried to get the attention of people in government by essentially yelling as loud as they could through publishing these works that have been almost entirely ignored. So some of these books were, you know, I collected them from thrift stores and from eBay, and, you know, library discards. So, you know, I had books that were from the discards from the Harvard Library that had never even been opened. So it was really, looking at them was really a story about how passed over this topic has been. People have not wanted to think about climate change. And so I wanted to try to come up with a way to not only tell that history, but to also sort of honor and rehabilitate these words of these people who had tried so hard to get our attention, and also like create a sort of physical remediation. So what you're actually looking at here are the books themselves, but that have been burned or biochar. So in this case, it's a form of low oxygen burning that actually converts the carbon in the books themselves, since of course they're made of trees, into a very stable form of carbon that can then be, after the conclusion of the exhibition of the books, buried in the earth. And it will not only kind of be a symbolic memorial to these works, but literally is sequestering the carbon in the pages of the books, potentially for thousands of years.
That's really significantly, considerably interesting. Jenny, there are so many other questions that I'd like to make you, like the piano, for example. Why the piano? My only concern is that you know, the time that we're just you know, we're gonna really stretch this through. Just 2 words about this artwork. Can you just tell me something more like significant, a highlight of this artwork for yours?
Sure, absolutely. So this piece was just on display at the Smithsonian. And what it is a player piano that, of course, like most player pianos, has ivory keys. It plays a score that's based on a mathematical algorithm that predicts when elephants may become extinct. And so what you hear when you listen to this is this sort of ghostly music of the potential extinction of elephants being played on the very material that's driving the poaching crisis.
Jenny, it's amazing. I mean, we want to work with you more, definitely. We'll involve you more. Thank you so much for this short but intense interview. And we'll definitely keep in touch.
Okay, well, it's been my pleasure to speak with you, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Hello, good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to introduce today the great artist Mbongeni Buthelezi. We have been interviewing Mbongeni because of the TNOC Festival, the Nature of Cities Festival, which is going to be happening at the end of March, in fact, from the 29th until the 31st of March. And the TNOC is a partner of Cities with Nature. And Cities with Nature is been contributing to the festival, involving interesting artists. and just conveying, what art can be doing for raising awareness on the environmental problems that nowadays stress our planet. Mbongeni has a very interesting background. In fact, he's been working on developing a unique technique of art making using discarded plastics in a melting process. And then he paints in imposter solid forms, burnt with a heat gun onto a thick roofing plastic surface. So it creates a new form of painting, so-called plastic painting. His background is quite interesting. In fact, he's been working in South Africa, but he has also exhibited in, I would say, all throughout, like international, like in, besides Johannesburg, and also in Prague, and in the United States, so in Canada, Australia, Europe, so all over the places. Now, I would love to give the floor to Mbongeni, and just, the first question that I would ask you is why, how the idea came up to you to be just getting plastics and then focusing on such an important topic, to be denouncing an environmental problem. And then we'll go through some of your artwork so that you can explain us more, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. Look, I mean, my work was actually born out of necessity. By necessity means that, when I started studying art in Soweto, way back in the 80s, actually, when I started as a part-time student, it was hard, no resources. And, for me as an artist, and also to be able to achieve, the goal of becoming one day, was to actually look at, slightly beyond just, ordinary materials, that one could walk into an art shop and purchase. So for me, I had to really think out of the box and make sure that I think creatively, And at the time, remember, I'm talking about 1991 here, where, recycling was not even something too many people talking about. And with me as an artist, identifying plastic as something that I could possibly use in my work, it just came out of nowhere. It didn't come from the plan, but I just saw this beautiful material, that I could actually experiment and be able to do something out of it. And, you must also remember that, recycling, as I said, it wasn't something that was in my mind. For me as an artist, the whole, intention was to meet the goal of making art. Not knowing that I'm contributing so much, in the world towards awareness, and also making sure that I contribute, towards, environment and all of that.
That's absolutely interesting. Now I'll go through some of your artwork so that you can just explain us more. That's it. I would start with this one.
Yes,
it's children colored with colored dresses.
Yes, this is actually a very interesting artwork, because it was an artwork that I exhibited in one of my solo exhibitions in Johannesburg. And, you see the plastic on the floor. I'm actually also trying to make people understand that the beauty that they see on the wall in a form of an artwork with children, it started on the floor at some point. I had to go out there and collect these plastics and make sure that I create something out of it. And, that is why I also try to create something beautiful out of this plastic, so that people can begin to take note, So it's my way of trying to really raise the awareness and create beauty out of nothing.
It's quite interesting, I would say. So this is the second one that you can just explain us more.
This is also it's very interesting, because if you look closely, you know, first of all is the child focusing on something, you know, that could be interpreted in any way. And, you know, everything has been made out of recycled plastics. And if you look closely at the t-shirt, you know, that is worn by this child, you know, I got a text from one of the bags, you know, that is written "and full of hope." So, you know, for me, I'm an optimist. You know, I always believe that as humankind, you know, at some point we will realize that we'll have to do something not only about our children, you know, who are suffering in the world, but we can also think about, you know, how we can reduce waste in the world and try to create something useful out of it. So in my case, I create waste, which is in a form of plastic, and try to come up with a positive message, you know, that I'm trying to send to the world out there. And in this case, my concern is, you know, the abuse of children and women in the world out there. So, you know, you can just about see how I'm really trying to make sense out of what people regard as nothing and problematic.
It's so interesting. I would say women and Black people and children are the most vulnerable, right? I mean, there has been over history categories which have not been really voiced throughout. So it's beautiful that you can just bring it up.
Thank you.
We have this other image.
In this image, I mean, you can see this beautiful lady, you know, with her handbag, you know, focusing on her cell phone, you know, sending a message or reading an email or something. I mean, you can just about see, you know, how I'm trying to incorporate, you know, the awareness, you know, in the world out there, you know, the social network, the connection, you know, something that connects us in the world as human beings. You know, we all carrying cell phones, you know, in our hands. You know, our beautiful women are carrying their handbags with all their accessories and all of that. I mean, it's the period in which we are. And for me as an artist, you know, to sort of bring together that kind of message and information, you know, and at the very same time, you know, try to bring this very important message, you know, with regards to the awareness, because believe you me, I mean, we can't run away from these cell phones as much as we can't run away from the manner in which, you know, climate change, consumerism, all those things are actually combined into one. You know, so with my work and all of that, you know, I'm trying to bring all these elements in a very natural and easy way to look at, you know, kind of a situation. My subject matters are very, very simple.
Instead of liberating us, it's just caged us in, right? We became the new slaves of a new system. Yes. We have this other artwork.
And we have this artwork too. I mean, again, here, I mean, I've got a little boy, you know, I mean, that I used to see in the house running around, fixing things, you know, his bike and all of that. I mean, those are the things that I believe that with children and the awareness and the sharing of information, and I think we must also try to learn more or to listen more as parents, you know, to our children, you know, much as we try to, because we are more experienced than they are, you know, we give them information, but we must also be willing to receive, you know, from them, you know, and be able to actually share the information, you know, on a level platform, so that we can begin to make them aware that, look, this is what you know, the world is experiencing today, and they can also contribute, you know, and be, you know, positive citizens, you know, not only in their countries, but in the world.
This one?
Again, simple subject, a boy carrying his ball, you know, it is more like me trying to extract and learning from what I see on a daily basis, where I see, I believe that children must be allowed to be children in a form of, being allowed to be who they are, which is to play and be able to learn, and this is where we come in as adults, or as parents or as guardians to say, look, much as you are where you are, but you must be aware that the world is facing so many challenges today. And one of them is you guys must take care of where we are in the form of not just discarding things anywhere you are, anywhere you like, in a form of throwing away stuff, take care, try to reuse things, in a form of playing, you create a ball out of plastic, a soccer ball. It becomes interesting, for kids playing in the street,
We totally forgot that playing is one of the best ways to be interacting with each other.
Most definitely. It brings, again, a child focusing on the cell phone, sending some messages, receiving whatever, it is the world where we are today that we cannot run away from. And let us use all these resources and these gadgets. This child is carrying a cell phone. Let us also use this very cell phone to send the message to him to say, look, you enjoy whatever that you are doing there, but the world is, the world needs you. You must contribute and become someone who will actually help in trying to curb some of the challenges that the world is facing today. It's also simple, very basic.
Now we are unfortunately getting to the last picture, although I will listen for you forever.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this again, it's a display of trying to recreate something of beauty from something that we regard as problematic. So in other words, by recycling or reusing stuff, we can sort of, the world has got everything for all of us, and we can always use what we have instead of creating more or manufacturing more,
Couldn't agree more. I think those are very, very powerful images and artworks, and I do really believe that the way how you're fighting yourself. You are creating a space where finally through images you can really get some strong messages that people can get. So I think it's really amazing. I thank you again for this wonderful, short but very intense interview, I would say, Mbongeni. And I'm sure that the festival will be really sharing your the way how you were explaining and just showing your important work. And we look forward for next editions. We definitely keep in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And once again, thank you so much for the invitation. And I am so excited and happy to be part of this. As long as it deals with the environment and recycling, I'm always willing and happy to be part of.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.